The doorbell rings. It's 2 a.m. Your heart hammers against your ribs, a drumbeat of pure terror in the oppressive silence of your small apartment. You haven't done anything, not really. You just spoke a little too freely at the factory, shared a joke about the party leadership over a beer. Now cold dread creeps in, a familiar visitor in this isolated corner of the world. You imagine the faces, the names you know, running through a mental ledger of everyone you've encountered in the last week. Was it the neighbor who always asks about your evening plans? The colleague who smiled a little too widely at your casual remark? Or perhaps even your own cousin, who suddenly started taking an unusual interest in your political views? You picture the drab, gray uniform, the impassive face, the thick file they surely carry under their arm, a file filled not with your crimes, but with your thoughts, your habits, your private moments, meticulously cataloged by an unseen hand. Every flicker of doubt, every hushed conversation, every casual interaction now feels like a potential betrayal. The silence stretches, a vast, echoing void, and you realize the true terror isn't the knock itself, but the chilling certainty that it could have been anyone. You hold your breath, listening to the street, and for a terrifying moment, you can almost hear the walls themselves whispering your secrets. How could a state cultivate such an atmosphere of pervasive, inescapable fear, turning an entire population into both prisoners and unwitting prison guards? To understand how a society could become so deeply entrenched in such a paralyzing fear, we need to rewind to a time before the whispers, before the walls had eyes. After the cataclysm of World War II, Germany lay in ruins, but amidst the rubble, a fragile hope emerged. In the late 1940s, millions of Germans, battered but resilient, began the arduous task of rebuilding. Families huddled together in makeshift homes, sharing scarce resources, forging bonds of community in the face of shared adversity. Children played in bomb-scarred streets, their laughter a testament to a spirit that refused to be extinguished. The air was thick with the dust of reconstruction, but also with the cautious optimism of a new beginning. In the eastern zones, controlled by the Soviet Union, there was a sense of collective purpose, an ideological drive to create a new, fairer society from the ashes of fascism. People worked hard, planting gardens, clearing debris, and dreaming of a future free from war and want. There were community festivals, folk dances in town squares, and a quiet pride in the shared endeavor. Life was undeniably hard, marked by shortages and privation, but it was also filled with simple joys: a family dinner, a walk through a newly green park, the shared camaraderie of neighbors helping neighbors. There was a burgeoning sense of civic duty, an earnest belief that together they could forge a better path forward. But this vision, however idealistic, would soon be subsumed by geopolitical forces far beyond the control of ordinary citizens, leading to a division that would irrevocably alter their destiny. The optimism of the immediate post-war years, however, was tragically short-lived, eclipsed by the escalating tensions of the nascent Cold War. Germany, the heart of Europe, became the epicenter of this ideological struggle. By 1949, the temporary occupation zones solidified into two distinct states. On May 23, 1949, the Western powers established the Federal Republic of Germany, FRG, or West Germany. Just a few months later, on October 7, 1949, in the Soviet-occupied zone, the German Democratic Republic, GDR, or East Germany, was officially proclaimed. This division was more than just political. It became a physical and psychological schism, dramatically symbolized by the construction of the Berlin Wall on August 13, 1961, which severed families, friendships, and a shared cultural heritage. The GDR, under the firm grip of the Socialist Unity Party of Germany, SED, and heavily influenced by its Soviet patron, quickly moved to consolidate its power. To safeguard the socialist state from alleged internal and external threats, the so-called enemies of the state and imperialist saboteurs, a new, formidable institution was deemed essential. Thus, on February 8, 1950, the Ministry for State Security, or the Ministerium für Staatssicherheit *, MFS, was officially founded. This organization, chillingly known to the world as the Stasi, was initially conceived as a shield against foreign espionage and internal dissent. Its mission, articulated by its early leaders, was to be the sword and shield of the party, protecting the socialist project at all costs. But what began as a defensive mechanism would soon morph into something far more insidious, transforming the very fabric of East German society. The Stasi didn't emerge fully formed as a monstrous surveillance apparatus overnight. Its early days were marked by smaller, more subtle infringements that to many seemed almost negligible, easy to dismiss amidst the larger narrative of state building. One of the first significant cracks in the facade of collective unity appeared in 1953, with the workers' uprising on June 17th. This mass protest, initially sparked by increased work quotas, quickly escalated into a widespread demand for political reform and freedom. Thousands took to the streets across East Germany, daring to openly challenge the authority of the SED. The state's response was swift and brutal. Soviet tanks rolled into East Berlin and other cities, crushing the rebellion with overwhelming force. Hundreds were killed, injured, or arrested. This event was a profound turning point. While the government officially blamed Western provocateurs and fascist agents, the Stasi, then still in its infancy, learned a critical lesson. Open dissent, even born of economic grievance, could not be tolerated and must be preempted. Suddenly, seemingly innocuous acts took on a new, unsettling significance. A student might express a mild critique of state policy in a private conversation, only to find their university application inexplicably delayed. A factory worker vocal about poor working conditions might be passed over for promotion or subtly ostracized by colleagues who had previously been allies. These incidents were often isolated, deniable, and easy for individuals to internalize as personal misfortune rather than systemic repression. People simply learned to be more careful, to self-censor, to whisper. No grand public outcry erupted against these creeping controls. The memory of Soviet tanks was too fresh, the desire for stability too strong. But beneath the surface, a chilling understanding began to settle in. The state was listening, and even the smallest deviation from the approved narrative carried unseen consequences. This early, almost imperceptible tightening of the leash laid the groundwork for a far more pervasive system of control that was soon to emerge. Following the 1953 uprising, the Stasi rapidly shed its initial, somewhat rudimentary operational methods and began a methodical expansion. The event served as a clear directive to the ruling SED party. Control was paramount, and the Stasi was to be its primary instrument. Under the guidance of its increasingly powerful head, Erich Mielke, who would lead the organization for over 3 decades, the Stasi transitioned from merely collecting intelligence to actively shaping public and private life. Its ranks swelled dramatically. What started as a few thousand agents grew into an immense internal army. The institution was reorganized into numerous departments, each dedicated to a specific form of surveillance, infiltration, or repression, from monitoring cultural institutions to intercepting mail, from analyzing foreign intelligence to suppressing domestic dissent. One of the most insidious developments was the systematic recruitment of inoffizielle Mitarbeiter or IMs, meaning unofficial collaborators or informants. These were ordinary citizens, coerced or convinced to spy on their friends, family, colleagues, and neighbors. The Stasi perfected the art of leverage, exploiting personal weaknesses, offering minor privileges, or threatening dire consequences. Imagine living in a world where your casual conversation with a work colleague could be meticulously documented in a secret file, or a private family disagreement could become a data point in a state security dossier. The stomach-dropping detail lies in the sheer scale of this internal espionage. By 1957, the Stasi already boasted 10,700 full-time employees and an estimated 13,000 IMs, a number that would skyrocket in the coming decades. This wasn't just about catching spies, it was about creating a self-policing society where the fear of denunciation was omnipresent. The thing that should have stopped it, public outrage, internal resistance, was effectively stifled by this pervasive fear, allowing the Stasi to solidify its grip on every aspect of East German existence, silently weaving its web across the nation. As the Stasi's power escalated, so too did its sophistication and sheer reach, transforming it into what its long-serving chief, Erich Mielke, famously declared would be an organization everywhere and nowhere. Under Mielke's ruthless leadership from 1957 until the fall of the wall, the Stasi was refined into one of the most effective and pervasive secret police forces in history. His vision was not merely to react to threats, but to anticipate and neutralize them before they could even materialize, thereby creating a society utterly compliant with the party's will. This ambition manifested in a staggering growth of both official staff and its invisible army of IMs. By 1989, on the eve of the GDR's collapse, the Stasi employed approximately 91,000 full-time officers. But it was the scale of its unofficial collaborators that truly reframed the depth of its control. At its peak, the Stasi cultivated an astonishing 189,000 inoffizielle Mitarbeiter. These were not professional spies. They were shopkeepers, teachers, doctors, neighbors, friends, and even family members, all secretly reporting on their fellow citizens. This meant that for a country of just 16.5 million people, roughly 1 in every 57 East Germans was a full-time Stasi employee or a registered IM. If one includes part-time and occasional informants, some estimates suggest the ratio could have been as high as 1 in 7 adult citizens. This level of pervasive surveillance and internal betrayal was unprecedented in modern history, far exceeding even the reach of the Soviet KGB or Nazi Germany's Gestapo. The Stasi became a hydra-headed beast, with tentacles reaching into every household, every workplace, every social gathering, creating a chilling atmosphere where trust was a luxury few could afford. Every casual conversation, every shared secret, every expression of discontent became a potential piece of intelligence for the state. What then was the ultimate aim of this invisible army, this vast network of informants and officers? Surely it wasn't just to gather information. Something about its methods and ultimate effect didn't quite add up, hinting at a darker, more insidious purpose. Everything pointed to the Stasi being a formidable intelligence gathering and counterintelligence agency, designed to protect the GDR from its perceived enemies. Its vast network of informants, its sophisticated bugging equipment, its meticulous record-keeping, all suggested a singular focus on information. But then a chilling truth began to emerge, one that flipped the entire narrative on its head. The Stasi wasn't merely observing, documenting, or even punishing overt acts of rebellion. Its true genius and its most terrifying innovation lay in something far more insidious than simple surveillance or brute force. The Stasi was engaged in a systematic, state-sponsored program of psychological warfare against its own population, designed to destroy individuals and groups not through arrest and public trial, but through a process known as Zersetzung, literally decomposition or corrosion. This wasn't about catching a spy or jailing a dissident for a clear crime. It was about meticulously dismantling a person's life, their reputation, their relationships, and ultimately their sanity, often without them even realizing the Stasi was behind it. The goal was to render dissidents harmless by destroying their social and professional standing, to isolate them, and to cultivate such profound self-doubt and paranoia that they would break down psychologically. It was a strategy of quiet destruction, leaving no public trace, no martyrs, and no obvious antagonist for the victim to fight. The methods were insidious, spreading rumors, creating manufactured evidence, sabotaging careers, influencing personal relationships, and even subtly poisoning the minds of family members. It was a campaign waged in the shadows, leaving its victims utterly disoriented and alone. This revelation transformed the understanding of the Stasi from a simple secret police force into a sophisticated machine designed for silent, psychological terror, demonstrating a level of totalitarian control far more subtle and profoundly disturbing than previously imagined. And what this pivot revealed was a depth of cruelty that went far beyond mere political repression. The true horror of the Stasi's Zersetzung program lies not just in its existence, but in its meticulous, almost artistic application of psychological torment. This wasn't just vague harassment, it was a scientifically refined methodology outlined in Stasi directives, particularly Directive 176. The aim was to decompose the target without leaving any trace of state involvement, making it appear as if the victim's life was simply falling apart due to their own failings or bad luck. Consider some of the specific tactics. Stasi agents would subtly sabotage a person's career by sending anonymous letters to their employer, fabricating evidence of incompetence or disloyalty, leading to demotions or dismissals. They would interfere with personal relationships, sending fake love letters from a fictitious admirer to cause marital strife, or spreading rumors of infidelity among friends. For those who sought to emigrate, their applications would be endlessly delayed, their lives put on hold for years, leading to immense psychological strain. In more extreme cases, agents might break into a dissident's apartment not to steal anything valuable, but to subtly rearrange furniture, tamper with food, or move small personal items, planting seeds of doubt about their own memory and sanity. Pets, too, were not safe. There are documented instances of animals being poisoned or stolen, a devastating blow to isolated individuals. Imagine waking up to find your beloved dog gone, or your personal belongings subtly out of place, with no logical explanation. The intent was to erode trust, foster isolation, and cultivate an overwhelming sense of paranoia, making the victim believe they were going mad or that everyone around them was against them. The target would be systematically deprived of social support, driven to despair, and rendered politically ineffective. This deep dive into Zersetzung reveals a level of calculated cruelty that goes far beyond simple imprisonment. It was about breaking the human spirit, silently and systematically, reducing individuals to husks of their former selves. The Stasi's methods ensured that the suffering was largely invisible, leaving no public wounds, but leaving behind an agonizing and enduring legacy for its victims. To truly grasp the devastating impact of the Stasi, we must look beyond statistics and understand the human cost of its policies. Consider the plight of Eugen Futz, a young writer and poet born in 1950, a man whose life became a prime target for the Zersetzung asterisk machinery. Futz, an idealistic philosophy student, dared to express critical views on the GDR regime in his writings and public statements. By 1976, his dissent led to his expulsion from the University of Jena and a ban on publishing. But the Stasi wasn't content with professional censure. They systematically isolated him, forbidding him from interacting with fellow writers and artists. His phone was tapped, his apartment bugged, and every move meticulously documented. When he protested the expatriation of singer-songwriter Wolf Biermann, Futz himself was arrested and held in Hohenschönhausen, the infamous Stasi investigative prison, for 9 months. He endured grueling interrogations, deprivation, and psychological torture. His young wife, Lilo, and their infant daughter were also placed under relentless surveillance, their lives made a living hell. Futz was ultimately exiled to West Berlin in 1977, stripped of his citizenship, his home, and his community. However, even in West Germany, the Stasi continued its campaign. It was later discovered that the Stasi had subjected him to a form of Zersetzung using chemical agents. They sprayed his cell and belongings with a toxic smear agent, a slow-acting poison, while he was in prison. He suffered from chronic health issues, including recurring infections and neurological problems, for the rest of his life, until his premature death at 50 in 1999. Eugen Futz lost his freedom, his health, and ultimately years of his life, all because he dared to speak his mind. His story, just one among hundreds of thousands, vividly illustrates how the Stasi did not merely monitor dissent, it actively crushed it, often with unseen, enduring cruelty, leaving a trail of broken lives and irreparable trauma. As the tide began to turn in the autumn of 1989, and the cries for freedom grew louder across East Germany, the Stasi faced an existential threat. With the Berlin Wall's fall on November 9, 1989, the regime's days were clearly numbered, and the Ministry for State Security knew its vast apparatus of repression would not survive. Panic set in. The Stasi initiated a frantic, desperate effort to destroy the mountains of evidence that documented its decades of surveillance, psychological warfare, and human rights abuses. Operation Deleting the Past began. Officers worked around the clock, feeding millions of files into industrial shredders. When the shredders inevitably broke down under the sheer volume, agents resorted to tearing documents by hand, burning them, or even dissolving them in bathtubs. They sought to erase the proof of their crimes, to hide the names of their informants, and to prevent the incoming democratic government from ever truly understanding the depth and breadth of their control. Who benefited from this silence? Primarily the Stasi operatives themselves, who hoped to avoid prosecution and accountability, and the hundreds of thousands of inoffizielle Mitarbeiter whose identities would remain secret, allowing them to reintegrate into society without facing the consequences of their betrayals. However, ordinary citizens, emboldened by the collapse of the regime, began to organize. On December 4, 1989, citizens in Leipzig successfully occupied the Stasi district headquarters, preventing further destruction of documents. This brave act quickly spread, culminating in the storming of the Stasi's central headquarters in East Berlin on January 15, 1990. Despite these heroic efforts, an enormous amount of material was successfully destroyed. Millions of pages of incriminating evidence vanished, leaving behind a profound mystery. How much of the Stasi's dark history had truly been expunged, and what crucial truths were forever lost in the chaos of its final, desperate hours. Despite the Stasi's frantic efforts to erase its own history, a significant amount of material survived, albeit in a chaotic and often fragmented state. What emerged from the ashes of the GDR was a daunting task for investigators, historians, and even scientists: the reconstruction of the shredded documents. In the immediate aftermath, hundreds of women, many of them former citizens who had suffered under the Stasi, became known as the Puzzle Women, Puzzle Frauen. They undertook the painstaking, almost unimaginable labor of manually piecing together millions of torn paper fragments. Sitting at large tables armed with tweezers and glue, they worked for years, meticulously matching piece by piece, an arduous and emotionally taxing process. Each fragment, often no bigger than a fingernail, represented a potential truth, a lost story, or a perpetrator's name. This monumental human effort, however, could only scratch the surface of the more than 16,000 bags of shredded documents that remained. Recognizing the sheer scale of the challenge, in the early 2000s, an ambitious project was launched to automate the process using advanced digital technology. This electronic puzzle involved scanning millions of fragments and employing sophisticated algorithms to identify patterns, match edges, and virtually reassemble the torn documents. What these dedicated individuals and groundbreaking technologies uncovered was staggering. The reconstructed files, along with the intact archives, laid bare the inner workings of the Stasi, its organizational structure, its operational directives, its methods of recruitment, and crucially, the identities of countless victims and perpetrators. These documents revealed not only the pervasive nature of the surveillance, but also the intimate, cruel details of Zersetzung *, confirming the accounts of those who had lived through it. The investigation brought forth concrete evidence of systemic abuse, betrayals, and the calculated destruction of lives. The sheer volume of recovered information demonstrated just how deeply the Stasi had embedded itself into the fabric of East German society, affecting nearly every family. Yet even with these incredible efforts, the task of fully piecing together the fragmented past remains incomplete, a testament to the Stasi's final, desperate attempt at obfuscation. In the face of undeniable evidence of its pervasive surveillance and repressive tactics, the Stasi and the SED regime consistently maintained an official narrative that framed their actions as absolutely necessary and morally justifiable. Their explanation was simple: the Ministry for State Security existed solely to protect the German Democratic Republic from its myriad enemies. These enemies, they claimed, ranged from the intelligence agencies of the capitalist West, the CIA and West German BND, to internal saboteurs, agents provocateurs, and counter-revolutionary elements who sought to undermine the socialist state from within. The Stasi presented itself as the vigilant guardian of peace, stability, and the hard-won achievements of socialism, defending the working class from exploitation and corruption. They argued that their extensive surveillance, their network of informants, and even their more coercive methods were vital tools in an ongoing ideological war, a defensive measure against those who wished to drag East Germany back into fascism or capitalism. This official line was relentlessly propagated through state media and educational institutions, indoctrinating citizens into believing that any discomfort or loss of privacy was a small price to pay for security and ideological purity. Yet this explanation, when examined against the weight of the recovered evidence and the lived experiences of millions, simply doesn't hold up. The Stasi's actions went far beyond what was necessary to counteract genuine espionage. It targeted artists, writers, church activists, environmentalists, and ordinary citizens who expressed even the mildest disagreement with party policy. It created a climate of fear so profound that it stifled creativity, critical thinking, and basic human trust, far exceeding the requirements of national security. The enemies were often not foreign agents but internal critics, people who simply desired more freedom, better living conditions, or the ability to travel. The official narrative was a carefully constructed facade, designed to rationalize totalitarian control and deny the fundamental human rights of its own people. It was a lie that sought to legitimize terror, providing a false answer to the chilling question of why a state would spy so ruthlessly on its own citizens. When peeling back the layers of official rhetoric and propaganda, the closest truth regarding the Stasi's actual purpose and methods becomes chillingly clear. The Ministry for State Security was not primarily a defensive shield against genuine external threats, nor was it merely an organization for traditional intelligence gathering. While it certainly engaged in those activities, its overarching and most insidious function was to serve as the principal instrument for maintaining the absolute power of the ruling Socialist Unity Party, SED, at any cost. The Stasi was designed to ensure the total ideological conformity and unwavering loyalty of the East German population. Its true mission was to crush any hint of independent thought, any nascent dissent, any individual initiative that deviated from the prescribed socialist path. This was achieved by cultivating a pervasive climate of fear, distrust, and paranoia, effectively turning citizens into instruments of their own oppression. By creating a society where everyone suspected everyone else, where friendships and family bonds could be undermined by a secret report, the Stasi eradicated the potential for collective action against the state. It was a sophisticated system of social engineering, designed not just to identify and neutralize enemies, but to prevent enemies from even forming. The elaborate psychological torture of Zersetzung wasn't a side effect. It was a core strategy for breaking the human spirit and preempting any organized resistance. The ultimate goal was to ensure the SED's unchallenged dominance, transforming East Germany into a meticulously controlled, self-policing society where dissent was unthinkable. The evidence points to a regime so terrified of its own people that it built an internal empire of suspicion, creating a system of psychological terror that deeply scarred generations. It was a stark manifestation of a state prioritizing its own survival and ideology above the fundamental dignity and freedom of its citizens, demonstrating the perilous depths to which unchecked power can sink. We've delved into the methods, the human cost, and the profound psychological damage wrought by the Stasi. But to truly grasp the monumental scale of this surveillance state, to understand how deeply it penetrated every aspect of East German life, one single fact stands out, a chilling statistic that defines its totalitarian ambition and unparalleled reach. By 1989, just before its collapse, the Stasi had approximately 91,000 full-time employees. This alone made it one of the largest state security apparatuses per capita in the world. However, the true horror lies in its vast network of inoffizielle Mitarbeiter, the unofficial collaborators. The Stasi cultivated around 189,000 of these informants. When you combine the full-time agents and the part-time informants, you arrive at a staggering figure, nearly 280,000 individuals actively working for the Stasi. In a country of only 16.5 million people, this meant that roughly 1 in every 57 East German citizens was either a paid officer or a registered informant. But that number, disturbing as it is, doesn't fully encapsulate the depth of penetration. Some historians and researchers argue that if you include all the citizens who were at some point coerced, blackmailed, or otherwise compelled to provide information, even informally or briefly, the figure for active adult collaborators could soar to as high as 1 in 7. 1 in 7 adult citizens. Imagine standing in a crowd of 7 people and knowing that statistically, one of them is informing on the others. This ratio is unprecedented in modern history, eclipsing even the most repressive regimes. For comparison, the Gestapo in Nazi Germany, operating in a much larger country, had far fewer full-time agents and a significantly smaller network of informants relative to its population. The Soviet KGB, for all its might, never achieved such a saturation of internal espionage. This wasn't merely a police force. It was a complete societal architecture built on suspicion and betrayal, designed to ensure that no individual could truly trust anyone, anywhere. It wasn't just state surveillance. It was the entire state itself turned into a surveillance machine, utterly unique in its pervasive reach. The story of the Stasi is more than just a chapter in the Cold War. It's a chilling case study in the depths of totalitarian control and the fragility of human freedom. It forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about human nature, both the capacity for calculated cruelty by those in power and the insidious ease with which ordinary people can be compelled to betray one another. The Stasi's legacy serves as a stark reminder of the dangers of unchecked power, the vital importance of transparency, and the corrosive effect of fear on a society. It demonstrates how a state, in its relentless pursuit of ideological purity, can systematically dismantle the very fabric of trust, turning neighbors into suspects and friends into potential informants. Even decades after the fall of the Berlin Wall and the collapse of the GDR, the echoes of the Stasi's surveillance continue to resonate. The hundreds of thousands of files preserved and open to the public offered a painful reckoning for many, forcing individuals to confront the truth of betrayals by loved ones, but also providing a crucial testament to history. It underscores the enduring necessity of remembering such dark periods, not to wallow in past grievances, but to learn from them, to safeguard against similar abuses, and to cherish the freedoms that can so easily be eroded. The Stasi's story is a powerful warning that the desire for security, when untempered by respect for individual liberty and dignity, can lead to the creation of a prison built not with walls, but with fear itself. If this kept you up at night, subscribe. We post dark history every week.